Rise of industrialization in Europe. The political revolutions swept away the restrictions of old regimes. After 1815, the economies of Western Europe were ready to begin industrializing. Industrialization took hold in Belgium and northern France, as businessmen visited Britain to observe the changes and spy out industrial secrets. By the 1820s, several thousand Britons were at work in the continent of Europe, setting up machines, training workers in the new methods, and even starting their own businesses. Acutely aware of Britain's head start and the need to stimulate their own industries, European governments took action. They created technical schools, they eliminated internal tariff barriers, tolls, and other hindrances to trade. They encouraged the formation of joint stock companies and banks to channel private savings into industrial investments. By 1830, the political climate in Western Europe was as favorable to business as Britain's had been a half century earlier. Abundant coal and iron ore deposits determined the concentration of industries in a swath of territories running from northern France through Belgium and the Ruhr district of western Germany to Silesia and Prussia, now part of Poland. By the 1850s, France, Belgium, and the German states were in the midst of an industrial boom like that of Britain, based on iron, cotton, steam engines, and railroads. Section Review. The Industrial Revolution arose from population growth, an agricultural revolution, increased trade, and an interest in technological innovation. Britain industrialized first, thanks to its fluid political and social structures, transportation infrastructure, inventiveness, and society open to talented and enterprising people. Among educated Europeans, practical subjects like business, science, and technology became fashionable. On the European continent, the revolutions of 1789 through 1815 swept away the restrictions of the old aristocratic regimes and allowed for more industrial growth. The technological revolution. 5 innovations spurred industrialization. 1. Mass production through the division of labor. 2. New machines and mechanization. 3. A great increase in the manufacture of iron. 4. The steam engine. And 5. The electric telegraph. China had achieved the first 3 of these during the Song dynasty, 960 through 1279, but it had not developed the steam engine or electricity. The continued success of Western industrialization depended heavily on these new reforms of energy. Mass production, pottery. Mass production, the manufacture of many identical products of the division of labor into many small repetitive tasks. This method was introduced in the manufacture of pottery by Josiah Wedgwood and into the spinning of cotton thread by Richard Arkwright. The pottery industry offers a good example of mass production, the making of many identical items by breaking the process into simple repetitive tasks. Before the mid-18th century, only the wealthy could afford Chinese porcelain. Middle-class people used pewter tableware, and the poor ate from wooden or earthenware bowls. Royal manufacturers produced exquisite handmade products for the courts and the aristocracy, but their products were much too expensive for mass consumption. As more and more Europeans acquired a taste for tea, cocoa, and coffee, they wanted porcelain that would not spoil the flavor of hot beverages. This demand created opportunities for inventive entrepreneurs. Josiah Wedgwood, English industrialist whose pottery works were the first to produce fine quality pottery by industrial methods. Britain had many small pottery workshops where craftsmen made a few plates and cups at a time. Much of this activity took place in a part of the Midlands that possessed good clay, coal for firing, and lead for glazing. In 1759, Josiah Wedgwood, the son of a potter, started to own a pottery business. He had a scientific bent and invented a device to measure the extremely high temperatures that are found in kilns during the firing of pottery. Wedgwood pottery. Today, the name Wedgwood is associated with expensive, highly decorated china, but Wedgwood's most important contribution lay in producing an ordinary porcelain cheaply by the means of division of labor. See Diversity and Dominance, Adam Smith, and Division of Labor. Division of labor, a manufacturing technique that breaks down a craft into many simple and repetitive tasks that can be performed by unskilled workers. Pioneered in the pottery works of Josiah Wedgwood and in other 18th century factories, it greatly increased the productivity of labor and lowered the cost of manufactured goods. Wedgwood subdivided the work into simple repetitive tasks, such as unloading the clay, mixing it, pressing flat pieces, dipping the pieces in glaze, putting handles on cups, packing kilns, and carrying things from one part of his plant to another. To prevent interruptions, he instituted strict discipline among his workers. He substituted molds for the potter's wheel wherever possible, a change that not only saved labor but also created plates and bowls that could be stacked. Wedgwood's interest in applying technology to manufacturing was sparked by his membership in the Lunar Society, a group of businessmen, scientists, and craftsmen that met each month when the moon was full to discuss the practical application of knowledge. In 1782, the naturalist Erasmus Darwin encouraged him to purchase a steam engine from Boulton and Watt, the firm founded by two other members of the society. The engine that Wedgwood bought to mix clay and grind flint was one of the first and to be installed in a factory. The division of labor and new machinery allowed Wedgwood to lower the cost of his products while improving their quality, and to offer his wares for sale at lower prices. His factory grew far larger than his competitors' factories and employed several hundred workers. His salesmen traveled throughout England touting his goods, and his products were sold on the European continent as well. Mechanization, the cotton industry. Mechanization, the application of machinery to manufacturing and other activities. Among the first processes to be mechanized were the spinning of cotton thread and weaving of cloth in the 18th century and early 19th century England. The cotton industry, the largest in this period, illustrates the role of mechanization, the use of the machines to do work previously done by hand. Cotton had long been grown in China, India, and the Middle East, where it had spun and woven by hand. The cloth was so much cooler, softer, and cleaner than wool that wealthy Europeans developed a liking for the costly import. When the powerful English woolen industry persuaded Parliament to forbid the import of cotton cloth, that prohibition stimulated attempts to import cotton fiber that make the cloth locally. Here was an opportunity for enterprising inventors to reduce costs with labor-saving machinery. Beginning in the 1760s, a series of inventions revolutionized the spinning of cloth thread. The first was the jenny, invented in 1764, which mechanically drew out the cotton fibers and twisted them into thread. The jenny was simple, cheap to build, and easy for one person to operate. Early models spun 6 or 7 threads at once, later ones up to 8. The thread, however, was soft and irregular and could be used only in combination with the linen, a strong yarn derived from the flax plant. Innovations in cotton manufacturing. Richard Arkwright, English inventor and entrepreneur who became the wealthiest and most successful textile manufacturer of the early Industrial Revolution. He invented the water frame, a machine that, with minimal human supervision, could spin many strong cotton threads at once. In 1769, Richard Arkwright invented another spinning machine, the water frame, which produced thread strong enough to be used without linen. Arkwright was both a gifted inventor and a successful businessman. His machine was larger and more complex than the jenny and required a source of power such as a water wheel, hence the name water frame. To obtain the necessary energy, he installed dozens of machines in a building next to a fast-flowing river. The resemblance to a flour mill gave such enterprises the name cotton mill. In 1785, Samuel Crompton patented a machine that combined the fast features of the jenny and the water frame. This device, called the mule, produced a strong thread that was thin enough to be used to make a better type of cotton called muslin. The mule could make a finer, more even thread than could any human being, and at a lower cost. At last, British industry could undersell high-quality handmade cotton cloth from India. British cotton output increased tenfold between 1770 and 1790. The boom in the thread production and the soaring demand for cloth encouraged inventors to mechanize the rest of textile manufacturing. Power looms were perfected after 1815. Other inventions of the period included carding machines, chlorine bleach, and cylindrical presses to print designs on fabric. By the 1830s, large textile mills, powered by steam engines, were performing all steps necessary to turn raw cotton into printed cloth. Mechanization offered two advantages: increased productivity for the manufacturer and lower prices for the consumer. Whereas in India it took 500 hours to spin a pound of cotton, the mule of 1790 could do so in 3 persons' hours. And the self-acting mule, an improved version introduced in 1830, required only 80 minutes. Cotton mills needed very few skilled workers, and managers often hired children to tend the spinning wheels. The same was true of power looms, which gradually replaced hand loom weaving. The number of power looms rose from 2,400 in 1813 to 500,000 by 1850. Meanwhile, the price of cloth fell by 90% between 1782 and 1812 and kept on dropping. The industrialization of Britain made cotton America's most valuable crop. In the 1790s, most of Britain's cotton came from India. In 1793, the American Eli Whitney patented his cotton gin, a simple device that separated the bolls or seed pods from the fiber and made cotton growing economically. These inventions permitted the spread of cotton farming into Georgia, then into Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and finally as far west as Texas. By the late 1850s, the southern states were producing 1 million tons of cotton a year, 5/6 of the world's total. With the help of British craftsmen who introduced jennies, mules, and power looms, Americans developed their own cotton industry in the 1820s. By 1840, the United States had 1,200 cotton mills, 2/3 of them in New England, that served the booming domestic market. The iron industry. Iron making was also transformed during the Industrial Revolution. Throughout Eurasia and Africa, iron had long been used for tools, weapons, and household items. During the Song period, Chinese forges had produced cast iron in large quantities. Production declined after the Song, but iron continued to be common and inexpensive in China. Wherever iron was produced, however, deforestation eventually drove up the cost of charcoal, used for smelting, and restricted output. Furthermore, iron had to be repeatedly heated and hammered to drive out impurities, a difficult and costly process. Because of limited wood supplies and the high cost of skilled labor, iron was a rare and valuable metal outside China before the 18th century. Innovations in iron making. A first breakthrough occurred in 1709 when Abraham Darby discovered that coal from which the impurities had been cooked out, could be used in place of charcoal. The resulting metal was of lower quality than charcoal smelted iron, but much cheaper to produce, for coal was plentiful. In 1784, Henry Cort found out a way to remove some of the impurities in coke iron by puddling, stirring the molten iron with long rods. Cort's process made it possible to turn coal into coke to produce wrought iron, a soft and malleable form of iron, very cheaply. By 1790, 4/5 of Britain's iron was made with coke, while other countries still used charcoal. Coke iron allowed a great expansion in the size of individual blast furnaces. Britain's iron production rose fast, from 17,000 tons in 1740 to 3 million tons in 1844, as much as in the rest of the world put together.